World Broadcast Part 2. The resonance of the coil is Tesla's main secret. Author Железнодорожный. Official science only considers processes in cylindrical coils, called solenoids. Of course, it doesn't forbid winding coils of any geometry, but it simply doesn't consider the interactions in coils depending on their geometry. Official science tells us that any coil is just an electromagnet or an inductance for an oscillatory circuit. Well, yes, it can also have a small capacitance, and that's it. When you look at the work of alternative energy enthusiasts, you realize that some kind of obscurantism is happening. Some people wind 3 or more coils on cores, some chase after their secret resonances and their interactions with other devices, even up to electrolysis. Some get carried away with bifilar and trifilar coils, and even go as far as capacitors with 3 plates and much more. The guys are searching desperately, but they're groping around in the dark. And the result is always the same. Without understanding the principle, there are no results. People like to play guessing games and wait, hoping for a miracle that everything will work out no matter what. And as a logical result, today a movement has already emerged among the BTG enthusiasts themselves to fight against fake BTG proponents. I want to return once again to the old patent. There are inscriptions on it. Witnesses here, highlighted in red. The drawing shows a working device that is 128 years old. People have repeatedly tried winding the coils lengthwise and crosswise, but it never worked. But there were a few who actually got it to work: Edwin Gray, John Smith, and others. Why doesn't it work for most people? Let's break it down step by step. There is a term called push-pull. This principle of an energy pump is used to create Overunity devices, which transfer more energy than they consume. Structurally, this is implemented through 2 windings, the primary, wound with thick wire, and the secondary, wound with thin wire. Pulses of direct current with a certain frequency are applied to the primary winding. This principle also applies to the Decatur, which operates at high frequency with a simple energy pump. Magnetic field pulsations generate high voltage. The change in the density of the ether forms the pressure of this ether, and since there is pressure, we get a flow of energy. Simply put, the movement of the ether is what we call energy. For all electromagnetic interactions that do not exceed the speed of light, the main model is the ring interaction model, which follows from the right-hand rule. This is the very ring of power that controls everything. But something is still missing. The most you get from such setups are interesting waveforms on oscilloscopes, lighting up gas discharge lamps, and beautiful streamers. For the proper operation of Overunity energy pumps, a much greater understanding of various parameters is required. The main reason is the lack of a unified principle. For example, it's important to know the source of the excess energy. It's clear how to pump it, but not where to pump from or what to pump. You also need to understand that the counter-electromotive force will always compensate for any change in the magnetic field. And that's why the driving disturbance must act unambiguously and in no other way. Otherwise, the change happens in the opposite direction and everything comes to nothing in any scenario. I want to emphasize the particular way information is presented by the progressors of humanity. Not only did none of Tesla's inventions bring anything useful to humanity, but Tesla also traded his new goodies for humanity all over the world. He offered various technologies far from harmless to anyone who was willing to pay for them. However, Tesla never disclosed the principles behind how his devices worked, with his devices referring to this. Highly questionable. Tesla encouraged abandoning old machines and his own knowledge in favor of new, unexplored technology. He, like any other progressor, was required to present real devices with real results, otherwise no one would have believed him. But, if you ask these progressors about the principles of operation, they will always lie to you. When people know the truth, they won't use the technology to harm themselves. And we can observe this with the example of his old patent. In the picture, there's a single-wire electricity transmission system that works. But to clarify how it actually works, we need to understand the full parasitic genius of Tesla. More precisely, we need to look at this egg, for example, from the side. 2 types of transformers in the patent: Figure 3 is a transformer with a variable transformation ratio. Figure 2 is a transformer with a conical secondary winding. Now you can see what the device looked like in real life. A reconstruction of the patent with a variable transformer providing any required output voltage. Then everything will become clear and no archives or secret documents will be needed. But the principle of mass exploitation should keep the common person away from free, self-sufficient technologies, so confusion is their main management technology. This involves domes, pyramids, lightning rods, spires, coils, and etheric electricity. Tesla's technologies cannot be revealed using ether theory. According to this theory, our world appears as systems of interconnection, dipoles. A dipole is essentially a capacitor, and all energy interactions in the world occur through direct currents, a sequential distribution of energy with a definite direction. But alternating current destroys the dipole, neutralizes the potential difference, and resets everything. It creates a region where it maintains oscillations of the medium. And besides alternating current itself, we also have radio, which, as we know, was invented at the same time in different countries. Somehow that doesn't surprise us. We think it was divine providence, but in reality they just gave the go-ahead from above to allow the technology. Since radio communication, again, just like alternating current, creates alternating oscillations in the medium, but at a higher frequency where the range of propagation directly depends on the transmitter's power. This technology is limited and unsuccessful. For example, communication based on the principles of torsion fields does not weaken instantly with distance and penetrates through any thickness of matter. Tesla was actually a marketer who mainly promoted unsuccessful ancient and extraterrestrial technologies, traveling worldwide to persuade people to buy them. He was well aware of the existence of the ether, but still exploited it for his own interests, fitting himself into the new world order of that time. As expected, these technologies have led humanity into a dead end, resulting in transhumanism and an economic crisis that has reduced people to impoverished slaves. A person is connected to the surrounding world. Variable electromagnetic fields primarily disrupt the subtle material processes of the human body, distort its aura, and suppress the nervous system. When exposed to such influence, a person becomes disconnected from the ether, stops feeling their connection with nature, and ceases to interact with the subtle material plane where informational fields operate and great energies flow. Natural connections become inaccessible to the person. I think humanity should switch back to static electricity technologies. Parasites will simply lose their power over humans, be deprived of points of contact, and retreat. Torsion fields and interaction. Now that we have considered pendulums and inercoids, their connection with the dipole, we can move on to torsion interactions. The essence of torsion interaction lies in the mechanisms of ether control. Torsion fields, as many have already heard, are fields of rotation, and to be more precise, these are fields formed by the rotation of a dipole. When we considered inercoids, we came to understand the principles of energy control through inertia, and any change in the energy of such a structure is also connected with the ether. But in inercoids, this interaction is secondary, caused by a change in inertia through a change in the dipole. In Russia, torsion research was conducted by Anatoly Yevgenyevich Akimov. He conducted a huge number of experiments to identify the main interactions with torsion fields. He made a significant scientific contribution to all of humanity, both in the theory of torsion fields and in their practical application. You can find many speeches and interviews on the internet where he talks in detail about these experiments. Akimov was one of the first to start analyzing the work of Overunity devices, to develop a theory explaining the principles of their operation, and to create a unified theory from scratch. He worked on the development of torsion fields together with Gennady Ivanovich Shipov. The essence of torsion fields is that they interact with the ether, directly control it, set it in motion. In other words, they interact directly with the energy of the spatial vacuum. Torsion fields propagate instantaneously, and matter is mostly transparent to them. Geometrically, torsion fields are vortices or funnels that either draw in or emit energy. These vortices can have either right-handed or left-handed rotation. Why are they named right or left-handed? Torsion fields can be generated by almost anything that is related to, contains, or interacts with a dipole during rotation. Since dipoles can be electric or magnetic, torsion fields can also be generated by magnetic or electric dipoles respectively. They form spiral structures. These spiral structures are formed by disturbances in the ether, which begins to move and, according to these structures, participates in energy informational processes. If we talk about the atom as a dipole, it should be emphasized that the torsion field arises primarily due to changes in the rotation or the relationships of the dipole. Under normal conditions, atoms of a substance do not emit torsion fields. Radiation appears only when there are changes in motion or the magnitude of electromagnetic forces, that is, only when there is a change in energy. There has been a lot of talk about an autonomous heating system that uses a single electric motor and produces much more heat than the motor consumes. The setup was assembled several times, but only a few who understood its operation could reproduce it precisely. Nevertheless, such a setup, just like Tesla's transformer, uses the principle of an energy pump. Most free energy generators work on the same principle, with few exceptions. You just need to understand this. In this case, the pump supplies water. It passes through a special vortex chamber where it heats up, then goes into the heating radiator, and after that returns to the pump again. The vortex structure of the chambers is again a cone in which the water is made to spin in a spiral to increase the energy of the substance by supplying the water in portions with a certain frequency and amplitude. The frequency at which the liquid pressure changes determines the intensity of its heating. The amplitude determines the volume of water supplied. By adjusting these parameters, you can change the heating rate and the volume of the liquid being heated. A regular pump is not very effective for these purposes, and a drive that provides an increased frequency of liquid pressure pulsation is better suited. It is the pulsations that ensure rotation and accordingly the flow of energy. This device is mechanical and is a superunitary liquid heat pump. Vykrevoj engine? Richard Clem, according to his own words, was testing an asphalt pump at the end of 1972. He was alarmed by the strange behavior of the machine after it was turned off. After starting experiments with hot oil, Richard quickly came to the conclusion that there was something like a perpetual motion machine of a specific form. A rotor made from a cone with spiral channels cut into it is equipped with diverging nozzles. The rotor, once spun up to a certain speed, kept moving and was able to drive the oil pump. Richard Clem encountered a mechanical manifestation of vortex interaction. The conical rotor, once it reached a certain speed, began to maintain its own rotation and pump hot oil. This happened exactly as with the heating system, only in the opposite direction. The heated oil pumped itself, cooled down and maintained the rotation. In other words, it worked in reverse and did not require a motor. This was the reverse process of rotation during the dissipation of the hot oil's energy. I want to clarify that we can observe conical shapes in almost all torsion or other overunity devices. They are very widespread. In the illustration, we see an explanation of heating through cavitation. It may seem that the shape of the cone itself does not play a significant role in energy exchange processes. The shape of the spiral, or what we know as the screw rule, plays a significant role. In superluminal interactions, the screw rule becomes the vortex rule, which sets the ether in motion. The shape of a cone is formed when we set and orient the direction of the spiral to produce certain phenomena. Essentially, it's a vortex funnel that concentrates energy, since the spiral can rotate in two directions. We can both gather and disperse energy in space, create movement, or maintain rotation. And although geometrically all these processes form a shape close to a cone, the cone itself is not something important. It only creates associations with torsion, vortex, and energy processes. So why is the shape of a perfect funnel and a vortex so close to a cone? The thing is, The cone reflects the essence of the same pendulum. A regular pendulum has two states, when the inertia of the weight is different. The funnel is the shape formed by many pendulums. Individual bodies, like electrons or water molecules, take part in focusing or releasing energy. From the apex to the base of the vortex, the inertia of the bodies is different, and all the bodies participating in the vortex process form this shape, which we perceive and recognize as a cone. The vortex spins, forming a focus, a zone where the system's energy density increases at one point. This causes either a difference in pressure in the liquid or a potential difference for electric current. The main feature of a vortex is the connection between rotation and translational motion. But the shape of a vortex can also differ from a cone, be formed by various mathematical curves, or on the contrary, be reduced to trapezoidal shapes. The shape of the cone is important, it has a shape effect, and it reflects the peculiarity of asymmetric structures. Any lever or pump also has an asymmetric design, providing a gain in amplification for the required result. This is a separate area of asymmetric structures for various purposes. Let me give a few examples. Everyone has encountered them more than once, but did not perceive them for their intended purpose. A grounding and a direct current power source are asymmetric capacitors, an asymmetric vortex coil, the magnetic field of a conical and spiral coil, an asymmetric capacitor, and a capacitor with spiral parallel plates. And coils can also be like this. And here are spirals that reflect fundamental interaction, a spiral magnet and a spiral capacitor, the connection between rotation and linear motion through direct current, a spiral capacitor, a spiral magnet. This basically answers the question, how do you overcome back electromotive force? The environment tries to compensate for any change in order to produce a definite effect. In particular, when it comes to energy, the mechanism involves twisting and extracting it from the vacuum of space, concentrating it at a single point. Depending on the specific dipole, its direction, the direction of rotation, and other relationships, you can get a huge variety of designs that provide all sorts of different phenomena. These phenomena can be electromagnetic, mechanical, optical, or related to inertia and gravity. The wireless power transmission patent shows we can stop using radio waves as medium oscillations and transmit signals via ether movement instead. Akimov tested this kind of signal transmission and confirmed that a torsion field signal passes through soil and reinforced concrete almost without distortion, providing signal transmission of a new quality. In such a torsion transmitter, the communication range will not directly depend on power, since the signal will be formed not by electromagnetic waves, but by changes in the torsion field. There will be no phenomenon of medium oscillation and standing waves, as well as many other limiting effects. Akimov determined that right-handed torsion fields at low power have a beneficial effect on the human body, but when a certain level is exceeded, both right-handed and left-handed torsion fields have a harmful effect on people. Here I wanted to note that such a phenomenon as radioactivity is most likely connected specifically with certain torsion imbalances inside the atom. The geometry of radioactive radiation in a magnetic field shows a connection with vortex processes, which means that by studying torsion interactions, it is possible to control radiation and never again fear accidents at nuclear power plants. On the other hand, most likely the need for them will simply disappear. If we consider the phenomenon of plant photosynthesis from the perspective of ether interactions, we can notice that the increase in biomass occurs at a faster rate than the amount of energy the plant receives from sunlight. Light itself is a high-frequency oscillation, and apparently plants use it as a frequency-setting generator to obtain energy from the ether and to synthesize the hydrocarbons, proteins and so on that they need. So it turns out that photosynthesis is exactly the same kind of energy pump as Tesla's transformer, only it also has the function of producing necessary substances. It's not hard to assume that by figuring out this issue, we could solve all of humanity's food problems at the level of highly efficient agriculture. So, microbiological phenomena are also connected with the ether. All world phenomena and interactions can be studied and used. Since Overunity devices have already been reinvented many times, but society ignores their existence and does not demand their mass implementation because huge resources are spent on shaping people's consciousness. Any deviation from the official guidelines causes a person confusion, a sense of deception and rejection because they have already become accustomed to living in an artificial society, and now he himself defends its rules. Conclusion. So the torsion field does not transmit energy, but only indicates the presence of energy redistribution processes. This is a disturbance of the ether medium, which propagates in one direction, carrying information about interactions. The greatest art of the exploiter is to create the illusion of development while driving their slaves into an increasingly controlled state. For a long time now, all progressive processes of human development have stopped around the world. People have been pushed into an artificial society where there is no need to think or interact with the surrounding world. Resonate with the outlet, watch television and do as you're told. I strongly suspect that it's the alternating field that deprives a person of their connection to the surrounding world. On the level of sensations, people's psyche is suppressed and panic attacks appear on the subconscious. Such a person is easy to control. Since then, people lose lifespan, degenerate and struggle, denied true knowledge and ancestral memory. And most importantly, any etheric interactions. After all, the ether is a subtle material plane. If people don't work with it, then the invaders do. They draw energy, attract local larvae, angels, demons, and other subtle material entities. The artificial social system acts against the laws of nature. That means for it to stay afloat, slaves must constantly support it with their sacrificial labor. The official view is that free energy is impossible, resources will eventually be depleted. Subtle interactions matter more than brute force or money. A person who has no knowledge of the ether remains completely defenseless against subtle manipulations and influences directed at him. Analyzing torsion interactions shows how complexity emerges from simplicity and that unified natural laws are both ingenious and simple. On Earth, the fundamental division is between humans and non-humans. Humans, in turn, are divided into two directions, creators and destroyers, like yin and yang. And then they are further divided into two groups, those who lead and those who are led, and so on. All this is structure. Right now on the planet, at least in the territory of the Slavic states, self-aware behavior and a clear decision to act according to conscience must be born, thanks to which people can have a human type of psyche. In fact, everyone has free will, and everyone, one way or another, gets what they choose in this world. The problem is we've been purposely misled about what we should want. That's why we have only one right choice: to progress, to evolve, and for that we will have to work hard and take responsibility for the development of civilization.